Okay, good morning. Good morning to the media present. Good morning to the public. All of you listening via. Good morning all. My apologies. Good morning to the media. Good morning to you listening via RTC. Good morning to you listening on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us for today's press conference. At today's conference, the Governor, His Excellency Nigel Dakin, will bring remarks marking 1 year as Governor of the Turks and Caicos Islands, followed by the Premier, Honorable Sharlene Cartwright-Robinson, who will be bringing updates on TCI's COVID-19 response and risk reduction plan, the country's finances, and the economy. Immediately following the press conference, we will have a short session for questions from the media present at this conference and some of our media colleagues who are joining us virtually. I now invite His Excellency the Governor, Nigel Dakin, to address the nation.
Good morning, Turks and Caicos. It was appropriate during the early period of emergency powers exercised in the Governor's name for me to regularly appear before you. I haven't done so for some time for reasons I will explain in a moment. But in the past week, as my first year as Governor drew to a close, as the borders opened, and as we saw the departure of UK military forces sent to support us while we were shut to the world, to be replaced by troops sent to support us as we enter hurricane season, it seemed the right moment to take stock. It is anyway good to share this platform with the Premier today as a demonstration of public as well as private solidarity at this important time. Stepping back for a moment, as we move from July to August 2020, it also seems to me we're moving into a new phase of our recent history, our new normal, a normal that may well have to sustain for some considerable time. I do hope at some point we will return to something more reminiscent of the freedoms we enjoyed as I arrived. I've now been Governor for just over a year. On the 15th of July last year, I swore an oath and spoke briefly to the House of Assembly, laying out how I intended to govern. I'm going to use that speech now as my guide as I report back to you, the people of the Turks and Caicos Islands. I'm going to talk to 6 themes: values that have guided me, my underlying approach to partnership with the UK, examples of this over the last year, my approach in Cabinet and towards the elected government of the day, the work that has progressed on the 3 priorities I identified, and finally, a reflection on the largest impression that has been made on me in the last year. That's you, the people of TCI, and why that gives me confidence over the next year. I first promised that I would govern through 4 values: listening, caring, serving, and being straight, and through being straight, being clear. I've reminded myself of those values every day, and I've tried to live up to them every hour. I return to them now so you can judge whether they were just 4 easy words. As ever, talking the talk is easy, walking the walk far harder. For some, I will have failed. Perhaps I could never succeed. But for my part, I promise and I intend to try to hold true to these values throughout. In my first year, as I learn, the most powerful of these values has been listening. I must have had 10,000 conversations or interactions. That's from school children and fishermen, to bar owners and taxi drivers, to hoteliers and small businessmen and women. I've worshipped with pastors and congregations of almost every denomination and ethnicity. I've talked to criminals, judges, police and prison officers, and spent time with tourists from across the world and citizens and residents from across all of our islands. I've met those who've suffered tremendous tragedy and those who are celebrating great achievement. And I've enjoyed debate with some of my greatest critics and those who are old and wise or young and ambitious, or indeed, for good measure, those who are old and ambitious and young and wise. A great advantage of being governor, indeed one of its great pleasures, is you can soak up the experience of many, and you can go and see issues that you've heard of but want to experience. Going to the problem or a challenge, or talking directly to the person who is in the eye of any particular storm, has always struck me as far more helpful than hearing about it third hand. And when I get to the problem, I'm constantly reminded that these islands are rammed with ideas, with talent, with vision, and with eloquence, but also often invisible suffering and quiet resignation. The amount of human capital on this island is extraordinary. The challenge for us all is how to unlock it and allow it all to grow to its full potential. In that inauguration speech, I said that I brought no policy with me from London. I didn't. Some spend the early months of my time here trying to discern the hidden motive. There isn't one. If there is one in the future, I won't be shy in explaining it. For now, I see my role as helping both the Turks and Caicos Islands and the United Kingdom develop a relationship of partnering, not parenting. I spend far more time explaining to London what TCI usefully needs, not telling or explaining to TCI what London wants. As a public, you've heard very little from me on the view from London. I think the Premier would say the same. But if I didn't bring policy, I did bring a thought to preserve and to improve. To me, this is about constantly building, with TCI, serious capacity and capability for TCI. I hope you've started to see that in the appointments I've made and the initiatives I've started or supported. To my mind, where we can build local capacity in partnership with the UK, we should seize the opportunity. A very visible current example of that is the formation of the Turks and Caicos Islands Regiment. The commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Ennis Grant, has been appointed. With Royal Marine and TCIG support, he's now close to finalising the selection of its officers and senior non-commissioned officers. 3 will go to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst in September. They will, I know, do TCI proud. We intend to build this regiment to be excellent. We will be opening up to recruit what will become the regiment's teeth, its reserve Marines, 40 in total, in or around September. They should be being employed operationally in the new year. If you want to serve TCI, if you want excitement and camaraderie, keep this future opportunity in mind. You can start to prepare now. Get yourself as fit as you can. Build your speed, build your stamina, learn to do pull-ups, as many as you can, smash out those press-ups, and see how many sit-ups you can do, and then keep improving. This is going to be a regiment of Marines that gets the job done. Apart from the regiment, the most obvious examples of seeking UK partnership has of course centred on the COVID-19 crisis. The Royal Air Force deployed an air bridge to TCI when no other carriers were flying. Through it, the UK sent tons of medical consumables, personal protection equipment, and top-of-the-range closed ventilators. It also sent the raw materials to build a national public health laboratory. More of this in a moment. It sent military doctors to support TCI's team health. These work with and for our local medical professionals and to the Premier, while logisticians work to help develop and manage processes. Planners work with local officials and members of my office to support the Premier develop a whole-of-government approach, an approach that bound ministries with very different roles together in one mission, to stabilise our public health and then reopen the borders safely and efficiently. The UK sent Royal Marines to help protect our borders, a helicopter to patrol our waters, and ships to patrol in the deep seas that surround us. While the Ministry of Defence provided the capability, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office paid for it. Public Health England sent out some of their best staff, including, for a protracted period, Professor Ian Cumming, the CEO of all of Public Health England's efforts in the overseas territories. He's prepared a comprehensive report presented to the Premier that turns this period from a medical crisis into a long-term opportunity to strengthen our overall health capability. The UK will help. He will return in October. Back in late 2018, prior to the crisis, it was estimated it would take 2 years for us to build a public health laboratory and populate it with trained staff. We are one of the very few places in the world that built this capacity from scratch at time of pandemic against a fiercely competitive, in fact I'd say combative, global market. And we didn't build it in 2 years, we built it in 2.5 months. It was the equivalent of building a plane while flying it. The laboratory is still adjusting, developing and growing. We can watch it improve daily. I think some in TCI thought this sort of testing capability was similar to taking a new laptop out of the box and switching it on. It's nothing like that. It's deeply complex and very skilled. I want to be clear, and the likes of Dr. Aswood, our CMO, and Dr. Braithwaite from our hospital say it better than I ever can, but it's been an extraordinary achievement for TCI to get to this point. Very few others started from scratch in the face of a crisis. Be very proud, TCI, of this achievement. While we normally think of national heroes in terms of our political leaders, in this pandemic our national heroes have also been those anonymously working, often into the small hours of the morning, wearing white lab coats. Samagio and Nevis, who are the technicians in our laboratory, working every day with live samples of the virus, are two such heroes. I salute you. Looking back to that first speech of over a year ago, I paid tribute to the two excellent political leaders we have in TCI. Many countries in the world would want the quality of leader we have at the top of both of our political parties. From my involvement with both, nothing over the last year has changed that view. I'm lucky to be working with both in their different capacities, and indeed I enjoy my time with both. I paid tribute to the Leader of the Opposition's wise counsel to me over the last year, and to the Premier's very well considered and decisive leadership at this time of crisis. To give you some idea of the care and attention that we all in Cabinet placed in our collective decision making, there were 30 hours of Cabinet and 4 separate Cabinets in the week before reopening. That's because we had difficult matters to weigh, needed to understand the detail, and were bringing different skills to the table, as well as different perspectives from different ministries. It's Cabinet, at time of crisis, where you understand that a Cabinet consensus, not a vote, is essential. How would it be if different ministers walked out of Cabinet with diametrically opposing views as expressed through a vote? How would it be at time of crisis if the Premier and the Governor were in different places? Consensus, particularly at times of crisis, allows the leadership of the country to be united. It is united, and that is worth a lot. Again, reflecting back on the last 12 months, back in March we imposed emergency powers virtually overnight. Those powers seriously constrain your freedoms, including the power of national curfew, and also allowed, in my name, laws to be passed. Those laws did require later ratification in the House, but nonetheless, the ability to exercise lawmaking and curfew are powers not to be taken lightly, and ones I didn't expect to be exercising a year ago. I hope you were able to see, in the exercise of my powers, something I touched on again in my inauguration speech. Throughout my life, I've been a committed small d Democrat. I had, and I have, the greatest of respect for those who are prepared to stand before an electorate and be judged by them. It seemed to me, and it still does, important that in matters as fundamental as this, it has to be the elected government who leads and is seen to lead. Health and the economy are, after all, devolved matters. It's the elected government that must communicate, not the unelected, hence me stepping back once emergency powers and curfew had been properly established and the situation considered by Cabinet colleagues stable. It's only through that process, which is the genius of democracy, that in the end the people can hold to account those who represent them, and through that representation those who lead them. As a result, I've seen my role in Cabinet, and always will, as supporting the elected government of the day deliver their manifesto within the law and the Constitution. In the final paragraphs of that first speech in the House of Assembly, I said my three immediate priorities were illegal immigration, serious crime, and hurricane preparedness, and that I intended to start work on them immediately. I did. After a year, this is where we are. The first step was to pull this together in an overarching national security strategy, something the Premier also wanted, and appoint a TCI Islander as Permanent Secretary for National Security. As an aside, it was the resulting strategy that allowed TCI to make a compelling case to the UK, and the Ministry of Defence in particular, that gained us the support we received while our borders were closed. On illegal immigration, an important first step was getting ever better at intercepting sloops. And the fastest route to that was better cooperation and coordination across government. Our maritime police and immigration officials and wider national security officials are now very good indeed, as is our relationship with international partners. The reason why the public now see so many photographs of overladen sloops is not because we're failing, but because we are succeeding. It's the empty hulls on the beaches after their cargo is dispersed into the bush that signals failure, not them being arrested at South Dock. And let's not underestimate just how hard this success was to achieve. Before arriving in our waters, the sloops have evaded concentric rings of defence provided by the US Coast Guard, including multiple aerial platforms, and when on station the Royal Navy. Many sloops are turned back before they ever get to us. We just don't see them. But when they do, we in TCI are playing goal line defence. They've evaded a great deal before getting to us. With those lines of defence improved and better sewn together, even more important therefore is the work that has started to properly attack the networks. That's working, and there will be developments to report on this very soon. Beyond that, I now look forward to us in the future not only arresting those who profit locally from this trade, but where we also mount intelligence-led operations to identify and arrest those who employ illegal immigrants here in TCI, no matter who that person or company is. We can expend enormous energy and money stopping the sloop, repatriating those who risk their lives and who end up with no ability to ever come here legally. And we can arrest individual illegal immigrants on the street or in their homes or place of work. But unless we attack those making profits from shipping them, or employing them and thereby driving down wages, we attack the symptom and not the cause. On hurricane preparedness, I believe we are far better prepared this year than we were last. Resident military planners have helped us work through lessons learned from Irma and Maria. Our command and control arrangements are better prepared and far better practiced. The work on shelters was fortunately well advanced as COVID struck. The Royal Marines have agreed to forward deploy a team to TCI, arriving soon, who will stay with us throughout the season, something no other OT has. So if we are struck, we will have excellent relationships in place, and the Marines will have local knowledge to help support the UK effort that then will arrive. Some members of the original team that left us on Friday have felt so committed, they volunteered to stay on to aid continuity. The helicopter crew who will come to our aid has been working with us every day for the last month, and the Premier and myself have invested seriously in our relationships with the 2 Royal Naval vessels that will sail to our aid. Next year, we will be even better prepared, with our own regiment, recruited and trained, and ready to support us in the run-up to and after any disaster. I make the assumption that many of you will have not been able to prepare your houses as well as you would have wished this year. Money, I know, has been tight, very tight. I ask that if you have preparations now to make, focus on securing that one safe space in your home that will save life and prevent injury. Serious crime has remained a stubborn fact during this first year of my governorship. The problem is easy to quantify. Going back to April last year, close to 90% of all murders occurred in Providenciales. Over 95% of the victims were men. Over 90% involved a firearm. Over 70% of the victims were under 30. Over 40%, and probably higher, could be termed gang or turf related. We increasingly observe that even those seriously injured in attacks, often as collateral to a murder victim who they're associated with, choose not to provide the police with a statement. Beyond the sadness when a member of our society is a victim of a crime who has no association whatsoever with this world I've just described, indeed has lived their life standing against this sort of nihilism, the horrible truth is that our young men are killing each other. Increasingly, the victim knows the perpetrator, and vice versa. As an aside, but an important fact, given our economy is under such pressure, only one victim since April 2019 has been a visitor, and they were staying with a friend who lived in the community. As we unpack and understand the figures, this therefore remains an incredibly safe tourist destination. But that's certainly not the case if you're a young man living in Providenciales who's running with the wrong people. A regular contributor to my Instagram account therefore quite reasonably asked yesterday for timelines as to when she could expect changes. This was my response. First, almost immediately, if public outrage about crime converted to the public providing information about crime in equal measure. Beyond that, serious financial investments made in policing by the Premier, at the recommendation of the Commissioner, should start to be felt this year. That includes community policing, which helps provide the confidence the public need if they're to support the police. In the last 12 months, 27 locally recruited officers have been trained for 6 months overseas, and they are now back with us and ready to serve. There will be an uplift in the tactical unit that will help suppress and arrest the most dangerous of criminals, which the UK is helping to fund. 2 thoroughly experienced UK superintendents have now been recruited. One will take charge of TCI's special operations, and the other will be responsible for crime. Both are tough and knowledgeable in detecting homicide. They will join the force, mentor and support their TCI colleagues who will replace them in 2 years, and report to the local police executive leadership. However, the police can only be successful if there's a proper reform of the whole criminal justice sector. We have to prosecute, convict, take successfully through appeal, sentence, imprison, rehabilitate, and in the end parole far better than we presently do. Work on that under the Chief Justice, but with new UK support to help her develop a programmatic approach to this issue, starts imminently. It was delayed by COVID. On timing, I hope significant changes to the criminal justice system will have occurred before I leave. It's one of my priorities. Finally, all of the above has to occur in this sort of environment where crime is treated as a whole of society problem. The Premier leads on that and is enthusiastic to make headway. I know the Leader of the Opposition, an ex-policeman himself, understands the asymmetry around crime. Policing is just one aspect of a much wider effort that's needed. Those that have probably got to grips with crime, Bermuda and Glasgow are great examples, have brought crime down in a sustained way. They, however, have found that is a 10-year programme. The National Security Permanent Secretary is pulling together for the Premier the programmatic disciplines this approach needs. So I offer no quick fix. What I do promise is to work alongside the Premier and the Commissioner as one team towards these solutions every day, and do it in a deliberate and planned way, drawing on as much UK support as I can. Support that builds long-term capability here and doesn't seek to replace it. A final word now of thanks to you, the amazing people of the Turks and Caicos Islands. Whatever your birthright, your ethnicity, your skin colour, whatever makes you different from the crowd or similar to us all. I've looked across the region, I've looked to the United States, I've looked to Europe, and I've looked to the United Kingdom. And all I can say is you were magnificent during the period when your liberties were taken and your movements controlled. You continue to be magnificent now that the onus has moved away from the law and onto your own personal responsibility. To follow the protocols is to do no more than to show you care for others and show you have integrity. We have a lot of those 2 qualities here in TCI. I always suspected that COVID-19 would, in the end, separate those who had deep integrity and those who did not, like oil from water. In the end, under these stresses and the need to think of the communal good, a person's real character, or indeed an organisation's real character, would emerge. So very many of you matched up to that test. Pictures circulate of those being foolish, stories do too. But what's amazing is how few these are. The fools are the outliers. You are the solid majority. Because the vast majority of the people of these islands got it and get it. We know we are all in this together. We know we have to protect those who are most susceptible or vulnerable. We know there isn't now a difference between staying healthy and restarting our economy. They're one and the same. In protecting our health, we are protecting our ability to rebound. We know this virus doesn't discriminate. It's infected many different nationalities on this island. It's also infected, since it seems to be a regular topic of conversation, the same number of Haitians as it's infected Turks Islanders. We also know we have a world-beating offer, our top-end, low-density tourism offer. If you're a tourist, let me say TCI was designed to cope with COVID-19. Our wide-open beaches are somewhere that people can socially distance on the busiest of days. Our condominium offer that helps isolate families as they wish, and our large, discreet hotels have never stacked our tourism offer high nor sold it cheap. We offer quality. We're the most beautiful destination in the Caribbean, bar none. We were designed to provide our guests the perfect escape from 2020. Our beaches are soft. If vitamin D and outdoor life is good for you, we have it in spades and our seas are warm. It's been fantastic this week to meet those of you who came here the moment you could. You are very welcome and we are glad you are here. As a country, we will know, I think, by Thanksgiving, after the hurricane season, and with an eye to bookings over the Christmas period and beyond, what our immediate future looks like. But there is no question, our long-term future is assured, not by the softness of our beaches or the perfection of our translucent seas, but because of the true quality of our people and the resilience of our culture. Even as I was promising to care and listen and serve and be clear, I had anticipated some of that back in July 2019. Indeed, I started my speech talking about the early impression the people of TCI had made on us when our family visited as tourists. But the positive character of the people of TCI is now the overriding impression of my first year. Hashtag TCI Strong is one of my favourite hashtags on social media. It resonates with me because I know it to be true. So may God bless these Turks and Caicos Islands, keep us strong, keep us safe, and now keep us focused on our future. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, thank you, Your Excellency. We're going to reorder the structure of the press conference and give the media a chance to present the governor with any questions they may have as it relates to his year as governor of the Turks and Caicos Islands.
Good morning, Mr. Governor.
Hi.
What would you say was the highlight of your first year in office? In terms of significance?
Well, I suppose the memory that I will hold for years is the moment sat at that cabinet table signing the first set of emergency regulations. It was never in the plan, wasn't expected in July 2019. It's a moment that governors don't expect, and so I think it's the period in the run-up to that and immediately after it. I mean, it doesn't sound like a highlight, it's certainly a very, very strong memory. If you're talking of positive highlights, I think probably it was the week or 2 weeks we spent early on touring the family and sister islands. A plan that we were going to repeat, and then COVID got in the way, so I'm very much looking forward to getting back across the island chain.
You said earlier that you've been having conversations with the UK, and they've been asking you what Turks and Caicos Islands needs. What are you telling them that you need, and what are they giving us?
Okay, so I think what the Turks and Caicos Islands needs is long-term, sustained capacity and capability building. I mean, the areas that I've focused on, because it seemed to me the areas that the people wanted me to focus on early, sat around national security. But I do think the contribution during this health crisis has been, extremely strong from the UK, and it was immediate. And I think we can say that it made a difference here, quite a significant difference.
That seems to be a bit vague, though. Could you pin you down to some specifics in terms of, if you're talking to them every day, there have to be some specifics in terms of exactly what you see as the pressing needs that the country has, or what are they telling you that the country, what are they giving you in return for what you're asking?
Okay. So in the most recent period, it was, as I said to you, tons of medical equipment, PPE, ventilators. It was some of the best that Public Health England could provide. It was all the raw materials we needed to build a national testing laboratory. I think beyond that, one of the most important, if you like, experiments that we ran here was we brought out a very high-flying senior servant from the UK called Victoria Farley, who's been working in the centre here with us on national security issues and working to the Premier and supporting the wider government. And I think as we look to the future, I want to do the same, bringing support out from our Ministry of Justice to support the development of our justice network, and other experts, rather than, if you like, Foreign Office generalists who sit in the Governor's office in Grand Turk. It's bringing raw talent into the islands to work with the government, in particular to work with the Premier.
Okay, there are those who believe that you have sought to militarize the Turks and Caicos Islands, and that you've basically seen one of the largest contingents of UK personnel under your tenure, your 1-year tenure. How do you respond to that, and how effective has the UK presence, military presence, been in Turks and Caicos in terms of real success, in terms of actual results? How can you quantify, how can you measure the success of those persons who you've brought over the past year?
Okay, so militarise is a strong word. I don't think we militarised. What we did was we brought in expertise, capacity and capability. So, for example, the Royal Marines boat troop that came in and worked with the Royal Maritime Police here was involved in the interdiction of a number of different sloops. I think around, I may have to check my figures, but hundreds were arrested with their support during that period. We've had a Wildcat helicopter with us now for over a month. That's extended the range that we can go and seek the sloops in advance with amazing technology on board. The Minister for Borders and Immigration has sort of seen that in action. Because we brought in capacity to support our medics here, extra doctors if you like, with real experience of building health capacity in the UK through the Nightingale hospitals, I think over 4 different procurement processes started in support of the Minister of Health. I think you'd say they were instrumental in us helping build the extra wards, in bringing oxygen making capacity onto the island. They were instrumental in helping the Ministry of Tourism do behind the scenes planning. It just brought weight and much needed reinforcement and really good programmatic approaches to solving problems into the islands, I think, at just the right moment. Almost all of them now have departed. We'll have another team come in very shortly that will be really focused on being with us if we get struck by a hurricane.
Okay, there were, I know you mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. Of those that you brought in, there were 2 of them that were involved in an accident.
Yes.
You haven't heard anything about, were they charged, were they set back? Because I'm sure if there were Turks and Caicos Islanders, that they would have been probably before the courts by now. But you have a situation where 2 of your officers were arrested, and you haven't heard a word from you since then. What's the situation with that?
And so they were investigated jointly by the military police, Turks and Caicos Islands Police. They're back in UK. They'll face charges in the UK, almost certainly a court-martial. The penalty that drinking and driving brings with it in a court-martial is of a completely different order to the sort of penalty that they would receive in the Turks and Caicos Islands.
But why weren't they charged here? If the offences occurred here, why weren't they charged and brought before the courts in Turks and Caicos?
Because wherever British military troops deploy overseas, that will be true if they're deployed in the United States of America, true if they deployed in Germany, they fall under military jurisdiction.
Okay, how do you, I know you said that your role has been to assist the government in fleshing out its manifesto and all that. Yeah, there's a perception that you have been micromanaging. I don't share that view, but that perception exists that you've been micromanaging. And there's also a perception that you have been competing with the Premier for leadership. How do you respond to this?
For what?
So I don't, no. I think the, I mean, I'll be frank, I think myself and the Premier have a really remarkable working relationship. And I think the Premier is the one person that understands that she can have a conversation with me and I with her. I'm the one person in the Turks and Caicos Islands that can't have her job. So there's no competition. There's very, very strong support. And I think, Premier, you might want to pick this up later, but I think this has crystallised over this period because both of us, I think in different ways, have just felt a massive weight of decision making on us. And generally, and I think we've said this previously, we tend to finish each other's sentences. So the Premier by far has the harder job of the two of us, and I assure you I don't want to.
And I'm not saying that you can push her over, you know, I'm just saying that perception was there. What have you been communicating with the UK as far as our constitution is concerned? Have you been giving them any feedback as to how best we can advance the constitution?
Yeah, fortunately, and this is true in all the overseas territories, when it comes to matters of the constitution, that becomes a negotiation and a conversation between the Premier and London, which the Governor steps out of. So I'll let the Premier pick that up in her remarks.
I mean, you've been here for the past couple of months. Have you made any overtures to the UK in terms of giving Turks and Caicos any kind of financial assistance to help with the challenges that we're facing now?
So I would only make overtures to the UK if the Premier asked me to, and the Premier has not asked me to. What I would say is that I think this government has put themselves in remarkably good shape because of the prudency they showed before this crisis. And they have a very strong reputation in the UK for financial management. So I'm sure if a request was made, it would land extremely well, but it is for the Premier to decide even when she wants that.
If you were to grade yourself in terms of, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you grade your first year as governor?
With 10 being extremely good and 1 being extraordinarily poor, yeah, I'd always give myself 5.
What are some of your weaknesses by your own ambition? What are some of the things that you felt you could have done that you didn't achieve?
I think a weakness that I have is that I'm perpetually in a hurry. I have little patience. I think that might be something that I also share with the Premier.
Yes.
Hayden, let me just ask if others now want to ask any questions.
Yes, we have a question virtually from
I forgot this.
DeAndrea.
Yes, I'm just curious, I heard that you did take to UK in your speech, you mentioned that you did take to them various ideas, various things you thought should be implemented in TCI. I think a more impressive recommendation to me is the regiment, which is coming, which is being built. What did you say? How did you pitch that, if you will? What did you request in order for that idea, that whole brand new concept of that branch to happen?
So the original idea, DeAndrea, predates me and originally came from the Ministry of Defence, where it looked across the overseas territories, particularly post, I think, Irma and Maria, and realised that the British military had come in and been able to provide support. But why wasn't there indigenous support in all the overseas territories? Particularly as, for example, I think you received support from the Bermuda Regiment.
Yes.
So there was, if you like, an offer there, it just hadn't been seized. And when I came here and looked at the issues, it seemed to me just obvious that that this is a really important part of building the nation, as well as providing capacity and capability. So then it was a set of conversations back with UK ministers, but I don't claim credit for this. I think the seeds had already been sown by others, DeAndrea.
Okay, and in relation to the construction or building from scratch, as you mentioned, of the public health laboratory, that too, where did you meet that? Because the public has really been waiting quite a long time on that development.
Well, as I say, if you look around the region, those Caribbean islands that can push out hundreds of tests a day had all of this capacity built prior to the pandemic hitting. I mean, they'd had it for years. It's worth, for example, Googling the public laboratory that's in Barbados. I mean, that building, just that public health laboratory, is larger than the Premier's office complex here. And so we were starting from literally nowhere at a moment where the whole world was competing for extremely hard to get consumables and machines. And it was thanks, frankly, to the UK's Crown agents who can source globally and fight for us that we were able to start to bring together all the many pieces of equipment you need to build this laboratory. I mean, it's worth saying that the lab technicians that I referenced normally would have gone off and spent considerable time being trained and mentored by others, practicing with much more experienced laboratory technicians. In this case, they were trained over the internet. I mean, I smile, but it's rather like you find yourself in a plane where the pilot's had a heart attack and you're being talked down by air traffic control. I mean, they did an extraordinary job of learning. Each time a sample is taken at the moment in the laboratory, imagine that you've provided a swab. From that, 11 times a pipette is placed in it and a different sample taken. Between each of those 11 times, on 6 occasions it goes into a centrifuge. After it's done that, it then goes, and that takes about 2.5 hours of preparation for around 22 samples. That then goes away to a further machine that takes an hour and a half to, if you like, accentuate the issue. And then the reports have to be produced at the end of it. That's why you're going to see these step-ups from 22, we'll move to 44, now we can do twice, we'll get up to 66. And then the big change is when we can bring automation in. As I say, most laboratories take years to develop this capability. We did it in the space of a few months, and TCI really should be proud of this.
Right, and in relation to crime, we've seen and we see gun crime continue to be a problem. And I hear you talk about a long-term strategy with who are committing crimes, which are in the majority, which you pointed out with your statistics. What are we doing about this specifically, and how is CCTV helping our Royal Turks and Caicos Islands police?
So you were cutting just in and out slightly there, but I think what I heard was 2 different questions there, which is what can we immediately do about gun crime? And secondly, what role does CCTV play? So CCTV has started to change the game. It will get better and better as we start to bring more data together in the 911 control room. And there's a new police headquarters being built at the moment, which will bring all of that together in that place. But there are arrests that occurred, and there were some very good arrests that occurred immediately before Christmas that would not have occurred without the CCTV capability. In terms of short-term moves to gun crime, I mean, I come back to this point. There are individuals in our community that know where guns are being stored, and we need that information. I mean, when you see that guns are being taken off the streets, generally it's because the tactical unit are going through a door at 3 o'clock in the morning and making an arrest and taking a gun off somebody. It hasn't just been found. So we need hard information intelligence if we're going to make an immediate impact.
Yes, Cartwright, I have no question.
And what about the weekend? How did the eateries, the clubs perform? Have you heard from police on whether we've had good social distancing? Were people wearing face masks? Because I've had some reports to the contrary, in particular about the face masks.
No, I haven't had reports from the police this morning, Deandra, because I'm with you now.
Okay, Governor.
And what
Okay,
about
the
announcement of
the-
speeches? And of course, I want to hear from the finance minister more on that. But just as head of cabinet, are there any early thoughts being tossed about it? Any concern that's more concrete that you can speak to about their pushback, or rather their opening being in October versus in July?
Yeah, I think I'm going to leave the Premier to pick that up, and I'm sure she will.
Okay, Mr. Governor, I noticed that you said quietly that you brought in 2 new superintendents from the UK. There's a concern that, you know, you're not giving the local police officers a chance to get in there and do the work. It almost seems as though you're saying to them, you don't have the skill, you're not confident enough to be able to command the top ranks of the police force. Why are you not giving the local police officers a chance to fill those ranks and assert themselves and prove themselves?
Yeah, well, first of all, I hope I didn't say it quietly. I think I said it at exactly the same volume that I said everything else.
I mean, you kind of sneak them in.
I think I've been signalling this at the last press conference we had, and I'm saying it again now. So this suggestion did not come from me, and indeed it did not come from the Commissioner. It came from his force leadership, of which are 3 other Turks and Caicos Island police officers. You'll hear that what I said was that they're coming in for 2 years. And I also said that they're there to help mentor. They're not taking up future jobs for really talented officers in the police. But it is true that we are suffering a really significant murder rate in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And we need to turn it around. And we're bringing in 2 very, very experienced homicide detectives that can work with our local police to help support this for a 2-year period. I think the officers that I've spoken to in the Turks and Caicos Islands Police that will be mentored by them actually see it as an amazing opportunity rather than a threat.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Governor.
Thanks, Hayden. Thank you, DeAndre, and thank you, Press.
Thank you very much. We'll now bring the Honorable Premier Sharlene Cartwright-Robinson to bring her remarks.
Thank you, good morning, and I just want to pick up where the Governor left off, that I know persons would have been concerned about the hiring of the 2 persons from overseas, but I did reach out to the local officers, the local leadership in the police force, and it was their recommendation and suggestion, so I think it's really a golden opportunity that we can have persons come to our shores. But I want to pick up, before I go to what I want to say to us today, on the Governor's report. And somehow we left out one of the biggest, most amazing things that has happened in the Turks and Caicos, for the Turks and Caicos, though COVID-19 has pushed it back a bit, in responding to the gun crime. But first of all, happy 1st anniversary, AG.
Thank you.
My ministerial colleagues and I thought it important to be here to support you today, because we found in Governor Dakin a fresh breath of air, if I should say it that way, in terms of governance and partnership. And no, we are not micromanaged, and no, we are not threatened, me in particular, by leadership. I'm not sure that he will meet the criteria to join the People's Democratic Movement, but if he's able to vote, we certainly welcome his support. But to be honest with you, my team represented here, the Honorable Minister of Health, the Honorable Minister of Education, Honorable Minister of Home Affairs, and Honorable Minister of Immigration, we stand here as a testament in support of the Governor for the assistance that we saw that he brought, very valuable contribution to the Turks and Caicos over the past year. And I certainly welcome it as the leader of the country, and I definitely know that we are much better for it in terms of national security. And I'll give you a little bit more history in terms of the regimen that Governor Dakin was able to bring, but also in terms of the support that we just recently received in health, as well as hurricane preparedness. So while we were busy focusing on COVID-19, that same military team, which I've reported already on the radio, I think when we hear military, we think war, we think armies, we think guns, but they have so many different skills, and they were able to assist us in supporting the maritime branch. In fact, one of them were helping in the recruitment of the regiment as well. They've supported us in terms of health. Dr. Jono, I'll call his name publicly for the first time, has been like an angel to the entire health sector, not just in terms of helping with the lab and support to the ministry. He's literally been so involved that he helped in terms of developing our testing strategy. And that's the kind of consultancy you can't pay for, you know, and so we're grateful and for that. Major Lucy, I'll call her name for the first time as well, She's been really a backbone for DDME in terms of hurricane preparedness while we've been focusing our attention on COVID-19. So no, it's not militarized, we call the word?
Yes, militarized.
It's help, much needed capacity that we needed at the right time. And just to say very quickly in terms of the regiment, persons will know that when we came to office, the very first meeting with Baroness Annalee in February 2017, prior to the hurricanes, there was a request for assistance in terms of sloop and national security. It was Spotlight, Search, I can't remember the name of the company. They did a research. They looked at where our weaknesses are in terms of national security. I had asked for assistance. They said, we'll give you some manpower to actually look at what you need. So it began from there, looking at what the police would need, look at what the maritime support should be. Again, Lord Ahmad, persons would know that I continue to call that name very often. He would have also sent out a border maritime team, I think that's what we called it, that looked at our border again, assessed our needs. So there were two critical pieces of work that was done by both former ministers now for the UK overseas territories. And then of course we had last year, March, where we had about 5 sloops, I think it was in like 4 days. And we actually had to call and ask for a UK ship's presence in the water, which served as a deterrent. And of course you would have heard me for the first time speak of the importance of a reserve. So persons would be confused because I have spoken of a reserve for the police, but that showed where we needed the support for maritime as well as immigration in terms of the manpower that was needed and the work that was needed to be delivered by exhausted officers. So all of that was a bill from 2017, which is one of the reasons why we're extremely grateful for the background that Governor Dakin has in terms of national security. Because you would also know that the national security strategy is a promise in the change document. You would also know that we've placed great emphasis on national security, and even as early as 2014, Minister Honorable Gloria Ewing would have brought the idea of a Coast Guard or a Border Protection Agency. We continue to call it different names. And certainly Victoria Foley, through the advocacy of the governor, is with us, has been with us quite some time, and she's going to be with us, helping us to realize this work in the Ministry of Immigration, and of course working towards supporting national security through our first ever PS in national security, Mr. Tito Lightman, and then of course assisting myself and the governor. So we are grateful, Governor Dakin, in particular for the work that you've been able to push along for us in terms of national security. The most exciting thing that I said would have been the pending uplift in tactical. Quite often Turks and Caicos keep saying, we need boots on the ground, we need boots on the ground. And then when military show up in different capacities, we say we have too many boots on the ground, but anyway. The bottom line is, the UK for the first time ever with an overseas territory is going to allow us and counter-fund with us. So yes, the recruitment is happening in the UK, it's happening in the Caribbean, it can come from anywhere. But they are counter-funding with us. This is just under $1 million, and we will have a critical uplift in tactical while we seek to recruit the permanent officers. So I am grateful indeed for all the support that the UK has given us in the last 3.5 years under my leadership, and definitely through the advocacy and work of Governor Dakin. So we are grateful. In terms of the Constitution, we will speak to that a little bit later, as I have not been able as yet to brief the leader of the opposition on the detailed response, and I would not want to do that as yet. So again, at the start, fellow nationals and residents, we are pleased to report that we have had a successful reopening of our borders within the last week. Since we opened, we have welcomed 20 flights with 1,047 inbound passengers at the Providenciales International Airport and 53 flights between the two fixed-based operations, or FBOs. You would have seen a release from the Ministry of Health of the successes experienced in identifying an asymptomatic passenger through our health screening protocols at the airport. While these are still the early stages, the protocols we have in place are working, and we are satisfied that we can find the right balance between the need to reopen our economy while not putting our people at risk. In the immediate period, we have had to put greater emphasis on economic activity as we seek to resuscitate an economy that has taken a hit because of the coronavirus pandemic. In this period also, we cannot let our guard down as related to disaster preparedness, given the reality that we are already in the midst of what is predicted to be a very active hurricane season. Though we have been focused on fighting the pandemic, Team DDME has continued to heighten awareness on hurricane preparedness. We are into 2 months of the hurricane season. In fact, we are approaching what could be the most dangerous period. We are 3 weeks away from the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season, which is mid-August, and to mid-October, a roughly 8-week period that is often the most active and dangerous period for tropical cyclone activity. In the last week, we saw several systems developing, with Hurricane Hannah making landfall in Texas and Tropical Storm Gonzalo threatening the southern Caribbean islands. As I speak today, there is an area of disturbed weather out in the Atlantic that forecasters say could become the next storm by middle of this week. It is a development we must monitor in the immediate period. Historically, during the peak of the hurricane season, it is also the period that the Turks and Caicos has been impacted more than any other time during the hurricane season. It is therefore important that we step up our preparation activities and ensure that if the TCI is threatened, that we are in a position to respond to protect our homes, families, and businesses. There are steps that we can take to ensure that as an individual, community, business, or country, that we are prepared, such as repairing our homes, checking our shutters, capitalizing on end-of-month sales at hardware stores, or purchasing hurricane supplies overseas that will attract 0% current import duties, developing business continuity and or family continuity plans, etc. If you cannot afford to repair your home, ensure that you have an evacuation plan. If you will be seeking shelter with your family or friends, inform them early. If you will be seeking shelter at an official shelter, liaise with DDME to obtain the new shelter guidelines amid the COVID-19 pandemic, and certainly look at the official shelter list and familiarize yourself with them. Continue to monitor DDME website, social media platforms for the latest on storm development, and specifically those that pose a threat to the TCI, and only share hurricane-related information that are sent out from DDME, the official voice on behalf of the Turks and Caicos Islands government. Remember, DDME is the official source for storms-related information, and TCIG will be guided by them as to when we should activate in response to a storm threat. As per the DDME slogan for this year hurricane season, be proactive and not reactive. The ongoing threat of the COVID-19 pandemic and that of this unfolding hurricane season put us in a unique, challenging position or period for the national economy. But we are not prepared to throw our hands up in the air, but through planning and a creative policy approach, move to keep the economy afloat and to return growth in the shortest possible time. These current challenges emphasize now more than ever the need for fiscal discipline and for the improved efficiency in our operations. The continued diversification of the economy must not only continue, but must be sped up. Since the hurricanes of 2017, my government has focused heavily on the financial services as a strong second economic pillar, and we continue these works, having conducted a comprehensive review, received and accepted recommendations, and then commenced the implementation of some of these recommendations. The establishment of a digital economy will also be addressed with urgency, and the urgency it deserves. As stated during the budget address, your governor has appointed a national think tank, which shall in the next 3 months assess all aspects of our economic life, so as to make specific recommendations that can be adopted as policy by the executive. We plan to broaden our dialogue with all sectors and stakeholders. This economic council will look at how we can further leverage the financial service sector, for we have long flagged this as a sector with serious potential. We are getting ready to enter an era of rebirth and rebuilding, ushered in by this immediate period of re-strategizing. While this is indeed a period of challenges, it is also a period of unique opportunities, and we expect to seize all. This immediate period, we must warn, will have its fiscal challenges as revenues are down and spending is up, but both because of the effects and the demands of this pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic led to border closures since late March and full lockdowns in the TCI. These measures have prevented the spread of the virus, but produced significant blows to our economy, especially in the tourism sector. With significant decline in the tourism sector, which accounts for approximately 40% of the TCI's GDP, overall real GDP is projected to decline by more than 20% in 2020 on account of this major tourism shock and other vulnerabilities. Based on the reopening of borders in July 2020 and the data we had available to make the projections, the economy is expected to contract by 26.76% in constant market prices in 2020, but is however forecasted at this time to expand slightly by 2.14% in 2021. The current unemployment rate is estimated to be in the region of 10 to 12%. This takes into consideration the fact that a number of work permit holders, which make up the larger portion of our labor force, has left the islands. By law, persons on work permit have to leave the country if they no longer have employment. The Department of Statistics has warned that estimating the unemployment rate is not simply an exercise of extrapolating numbers from NIB and NHIB databases. By its definition, to be unemployed, you have to be actively seeking work. And so whereas databases such as the NIB and NHIB database gives an idea of the level of unemployment, by the numbers paying into these schemes, it does not tell you whether these persons are still actively looking for work. We have been advised that in small countries like the TCI, with weak administrative data sources, the best way of getting the unemployment rate is through labor force surveys, which is not possible at this time because of the social distancing rules. It is for this reason that I have constantly asked persons to register with the Labor Department. To date, we still have a minimal number of persons who would have registered with the Labor Department. I am therefore again appealing to persons to register with this critical department. Throughout the Turks and Caicos Islands, there however seems to be a surge in the number of small businesses, which speaks to the level of creativity that has emerged as a result of this pandemic. We have witnessed the emergence of new businesses in the area of food takeout and delivery services, advertising and promotions via social media platforms, e-commerce platforms, web pages and face masking making, etc. We have also seen the repurposing of existing businesses. This is encouraging and it augurs well for economic transformation. The level that these businesses will be sustained will be one for the positives of this pandemic in the Turks and Caicos Islands. Our duty as a government is to ensure that we now leverage these gains, and working along with the Department of Trade, Invest TCI, and private sector institutions, we will be seeking to find ways of helping these businesses to be more sustainable, even after this pandemic has subsided, and we'll be seeking to find ways of helping these businesses to expand. In the coming period, we are also determined to put more emphasis on farming so as to improve our food security and create other avenues for earning of income. We are planning to inject an additional investment to assist people already engaged in farming or desirous of farming in the Twila Islands of North and Middle Caicos. It is envisaged that the funds will be used to help with purchasing seeds, fertilizers, and supporting small farming equipment. We are even hoping that these funds will assist persons in clearing the land, and for these persons seeking to venture into other types of farming, such as greenhouse farming, assistance will be given towards purchasing the equipment necessary to make this happen. The Department of Agriculture will be monitoring this project, and the public will be given more details on this in the upcoming months. As you are aware, the Department of Agriculture already has a program in place called Grow What You Eat. It is a good program that we have seen persons on social media displaying what they have grown in their backyards, and this is coming from throughout the Turks and Caicos Islands, from Grand Turk and South Caicos, which are not traditionally known for agriculture, down to Providenciales. These programs will help to address the issue of food security and will help to lower the level of food imports going forward and will assist in our push towards economic diversification. The challenge for us, though, is being able to provide incentives for farmers to provide quality crops in a secure environment on a reliable basis at competitive prices. We continue to stimulate the economy through our capital program. The Public Sector Investment Program, or capital program, has approximately 81 active projects as of July 24th, 2020. Active projects are defined as projects noted in cabinet for which contracts have been executed. These projects are at different phases of implementation, and a number of them will be completed during 2020, 2021, and financial year 2021-2022. In addition to these projects, there are approximately 44 projects in the capital program for financial year 2020-2021 valued at $35.2 million, which are actively being progressed for public tendering in the upcoming months. Combined with the active projects and the new projects, this government public sector investment program enters the crisis from a position of strength, as persons are able to diversify their skills or their skill levels during these times, and should be able to gain employment to sustain themselves and their families. I turn our attention to our performance, our financial performance. In terms of revenue, aggregate revenue for the first quarter totaled $43.5 million, $11.6 million, or 27% of which came from excess revenue returns from statutory bodies as net surplus. This result was $4 million, or 8% behind projected revenue of $47.5 million. Revenue was down $38.2 million, or 47%, when compared to the results of the same period last year. The significant fallout in revenue is expected to continue at least until the late fall or winter season. Although the borders have been opened or reopened since 22nd July and business activities are fully restored, it should be noted that historical data shows this is usually the time of year when revenue begins trending downwards, as it is the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season. To report a bit more, stamp duty on land transactions totaled $10.6 million for the quarter, which was $6.6 million greater than projections and $2.8 million from the prior year's outturn. Import duties and customs processing fees, which usually accounts for circa 1/3 of TCIG's total revenue, saw a significant downturn due to business closures and reduced economic activity. Receipts totaled just $11 million at the end of the first quarter. This result was $5.4 million below projected outturn and down $16.9 million, or 61%. As part of its measures to combat the economic fallout as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, TCIG enacted a customs duty exemption order and a waiver of customs processing fees for specified items. The total revenue foregone as a result of these measures was $2.6 million. Hotel and restaurant tax, which usually accounts for circa 1/4 of TCIG's total revenue, saw the most significant downturn during this time, generating only $700,000 in revenue in comparison to $23.6 million collected during the first quarter of the prior year. It must also be noted that as part of its COVID-19 response, TCIG waived the payment of tax, which is due and payable from 21st April 2020 until 21st July 2020. In terms of expenditure, aggregate expenditure at the end of the first quarter was $62.7 million, or $37.2 million, or 37% below the projected amount, while it's up $5 million, or 9% from the previous year's outturn. The significant variance to the budget is partially due to the full budget for stimulus grants to both individuals and businesses in the MSME sector being reflected in the current quarter's estimates. The underspend in comparison to budget was mainly seen in other operating expenses, where the $25 million budget for stimulus payments to individuals and businesses with the MSME sector was captured. To date, $7.6 million has been paid out in grants against a budget of $25.5 million. This includes social assistance programs. The variance in personnel of $3.5 million against the estimates is mainly due to the number of vacancies that exist. Year to date, $800,000 in debt has been paid, which reduced loans and bonds from a total of $3 million at April 1st, 2020 to $2.2 million. Debt servicing costs associated with this repayment totaled $70,000. The operating deficit for the 3 months ending June 30th, 2020 was $19.2 million. This outturned compared favorably to projected deficit of $52.5 million. The significant variance again is mainly due to the $25 million for individuals, tourism and hospitality sector and MSME budget for stimulus cash grants, which was projected to be fully spent during the full quarter. However, the payouts to date again only total $7.1 million for individuals and businesses. It is estimated that the payouts will continue into July and possibly August 2020. On a year-over-year basis, the results for the first quarter saw a decrease when compared to the prior year by $43.2 million. As noted, this significant underperformance is a direct result of the TCIG's response to COVID-19. The borders have reopened, and it is expected that there will be an uptake in both revenue generation and government spending. Our cash balances at the end of the first quarter, TCIG's total cash and cash equivalents in relation to all funds stood at $191.6 million. The cash balance at the end of the first quarter was reduced by $20.3 million. Restricted cash is $63.5 million. The development fund of $31.1 million for previous years included the National Wealth Fund of $25.8 million and the National Forfeiture Fund of $6.6 million. I must state that health and COVID-related costs are now in the range of approximately $20 million across government. The cash flow forecast for the next quarter indicates that cash flow should remain positive. The revised revenue outlook projects a worst-case scenario of annual revenue reaching $145 million and a best case of $203 million. In response, a minister's withdrawal warrant has been issued to immediately curtail non-critical expenditure. A supplementary appropriation aimed at reprioritizing the approved estimates and to further reduce expenditure will be tabled in the House of Assembly late in the second quarter. The Ministry of Finance team has begun to make credit arrangements with financial institutions to bridge any cash shortfalls as they rise. TCIG will also continue to focus on prudent expenditure management as well as strengthening and broadening the revenue enhancement efforts, especially during these uncertain times. I report briefly today on the business stimulus program. We've commenced processing during the first week of June 2020. A total of 1,388 applications, including duplicate submissions, were received. The applications submitted comprised 925 small business applications and 463 self-employed applications. Over the past few weeks, the Department of Trade has been able to assess 80% of the applications received, which resulted in a little over 300 applicants being approved and paid. However, impediments in the processing of applications are being encountered due to the submission of documents by applicants. To ensure that the process goes seamless, business stimulus applicants are asked to submit all requested documentation through the link provided in the email noreply@gov.tc. Applicants can also submit queries regarding the application process to tradetci@gov.tc. The IMF has predicted that there will be a decline in every national economy in the world this year because of the pandemic. In spite of our small size, we are better placed than many economies to bounce back quickly. This is because of the foundation we had prior to the pandemic and built a level of resilience. But we cannot get back to where we were without discipline, dedication, and innovation. Fellow Turks and Caicos Islanders, the present challenges, call for a united sense of purpose among all of our people. We have no doubt that once we come together, we can ride out the storm and come out on the other side stronger than before. With smart policies and investments, and with the rejigging of the national economy, we can quickly return to a growth trajectory. We are in this together, and we can and must do this together. But I must call on us all again to exercise vigilance in our response. We must follow health protocols because it will show. We must be our brothers and sisters' keeper, and we must be determined to steer our way through responsibly. Today, as I speak, our dashboard shows 99 cases since the start of the pandemic. And we see that we continue to identify positives from testing contacts of positives and through successful contact tracing. 61 active cases steady increases in recoveries, no critical hospitalizations, COVID-19 related. We are on the right path. We know the virus is here. We always knew, but our dashboard shows it, and we must do our part and act responsibly. May God bless us all, and may He continue to bless these beautiful, by nature, Turks and Caicos Islands.
Thank you, Madam Premier, for a very comprehensive report on the.
You're going to have to use your outdoor voice a little bit for me.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Madam Premier, for a very comprehensive report on the economy. When one moves around the country, one is hearing some very distressing stories for people who are hurting.
Yes.
And things are going to get worse.
Yes.
What is your plan to ensure that there is money circulating in the economy? For instance, do you, the $1,200 that you gave people a couple of months ago, that would have been by now gone. Do you have any plans, for example, of having an unemployment benefit scheme where people would still, over the next 3 months or so, be able to get some sort of income so that they can spend money in these businesses that are creeping up? Because in the absence of any income, they can't spend any money.
So thank you very much for that. Remember, the 1,200 targeted the hospitality sector.
Yes.
When we first forced the closure of the borders, we have committed and will continue with the second stimulus for all the other businesses that have been impacted by our closure of the local economy. Right. Additionally, I went through the capital program because that is a part of our response as well, to make sure that there's money circulating through the economy by employing persons and creating jobs here. So what we would have done in reprioritizing the capital program is to look at where monies stay in the country and move forward with critical projects, but also based on that. Additionally, we are going to be looking at all of the small contracts, which is already happening on the Public Works Department, where we are continuing to give contracts to small contractors so that they're also able to keep afloat. And you would have touched on something that I would only respond in the affirmative to say that we are supposed to be in cabinet at this moment. And we intend to, well, I will be presenting a paper to cabinet on a possible unemployment benefit through the national insurance. Temporary unemployment benefit, knowing that work would have been done by my government. We've already conducted an actuarial assessment. The rate was projected to be increased under that, well, suggested. We understand the times, and so we're looking at how we can modify our approach, but definitely today we will be discussing an unemployment benefit.
For those who don't know, could you elaborate on that, what it would entail? In other words, I mean, it works in Barbados and other parts of the Caribbean. People who are not working would now be able to get a certain percentage of their income over the next couple of months.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. But I don't want to delve too much because it's out there, so let me discuss the part about the 1% increase. So when I would have commissioned this in about 2018, an actuarial assessment to be done, any changes to this program, we have to have an actuarial assessment done. And it was done, and it was recommended that there be 1% increase in the rate. You would appreciate that last year, December, I did give a report, and I said that we had not progressed with that because also the last actuarial assessment of the entire scheme also projected an increase in the rate, as well as the actuarial assessment for the National Health Insurance Board also presented, projected, or suggested, I should say, an increase in the rate. So we had held our position at December 2019 because of this. So what we're doing now is looking at how we can fund in the short term for a benefit that has not seen an increase in the rate to support it. So following cabinet, again, based on the discussions we have, I'll be able to give more. But what it does is allow persons who are unemployed for a particular period of time, because it's not non-ending, to be able to receive a benefit from our Social Security program. Again, that is not government's cash, that is your cash. Remember, we do know that we have 3 branches. The fund has over 300 million, but we have long-term branches that are underfunded. So we have to be extremely careful in terms of looking at the national insurance program.
Yeah, hold on. The closure of beaches is likely to have a domino effect. We're hearing from hoteliers, other hoteliers, that they may have to close over the next couple of months. That could mean that there's a further exacerbation of the unemployment situation. Beaches is also saying that because of the low load factors, they are having challenges in getting people here. They're also saying that it's going to be very expensive to be able to get those airlines to return to Turks and Caicos Islands. Has Beaches approached the government about any assistance in having to market or get those airlines back?
No, we have not had any conversation with Beaches as yet. And I want to remind persons, this used to be our fate. Just in recent history, Beaches normally would close during this time, normally will close until about the time that they're projecting. We have not had any discussions in terms of the load factor. We do know that Beaches is one of our largest contributors, of course, in terms of employment as well as government receipt taxes and even to private businesses. But we also know that they are responsible for 60% of the airlift. And so, of course, we do understand hoteliers' position, and would have been the former administration in seeking to have Beaches not close in this slow period. They would have offered $500,000 towards marketing support, and that was done literally just a few years ago. So this is almost what used to be normal, that Beaches would close at this time. So we know what the impact is like. We know what it does to small businesses, particularly taxi operators, and what it may do to the hotels. So we have to ourselves look at how we can move around it.
Okay, one last question to me. You said the protocols are working, but yet still we're seeing a serious spike in community spread. What are you doing to build the confidence that you have the virus under control and that we have the ability to effectively deal with this spike?
So the protocols are working, and I tagged that to our success story at the airport, where the health screening would have picked up an asymptomatic traveler. And we do know that the protocols worldwide work. The protocols are not being tested. The protocols, you must wear masks. We do know, whether we know 10 things about this virus, we do know 2 things. Social distancing works, mask wearing works. What we see in terms of the increase in cases are, yes, we do have some that are not linked, but we do have clusters within clusters where persons who are not testing positive are people who were close to a positive, a known positive. So in those circumstances, had those persons just worn masks, had they washed their hands, had they not touched their eyes, their mouth, or their nose, we wouldn't have those additional positives. So again, the protocols work, we just need people to follow them. Okay, that's the most important thing.
Since I have Madam Premier, we're looking at another 3 months of economic hardship, not just in the hotel sector, but perhaps it's going to spread also. Have you given any thought to asking, for example, utility companies for an extension of relief, or let's say banks, because things will get worse? Have you given any thought to asking Fortis and other companies to extend that relief, knowing that over the next 3 months you will have a situation where people will not have any income?
So we think 3 months.
At least 3
but
months.
It could be, exactly, it could be shorter, it could be longer. We're in a serious period of uncertainty. I've been in touch with all of those businesses in terms of looking at it. I just want to say publicly again, Fortis did extend its rate increase, and they did put that forward as a part of their response to COVID-19, and we remain grateful for that. Those who would have received their light bills would have seen that this light bill, there has been a considerable reduction, and a number of them have gotten those reports as well already. But Fortis continues to position itself to assist those who would come to them about payment plans and to state their cases. In particular, they are still in a position to help those persons that social services would recommend. And again, we need persons to flag that they need this assistance through social services or to themselves approach Fortis TCI. We are speaking to the water company, who themselves have already extended their time and not to disconnect. And the banks are certainly a group of companies that we are still addressing.
Questions coming virtually?
Sorry.
So thank you for that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, everyone is having cash flow problems, and we have to understand businesses, our businesses as well.
Good morning, Madam Premier. I'm not sure I can get you. Go ahead.
Sorry.
In reference to beaches, do you know of any fallout which has happened as a result so far? Any resorts have decided to perhaps close, and the airlines have changed their schedules as far as you know at this stage?
No, there's been no shift in airlines. I continue to receive those as a matter of fact, the airlines that are here now are the ones that normally don't respond to that sort of fallout. So we see American Airlines, we see United, and we see Delta. So the ones that I spoke to that are coming in, and well, United is coming next month, in August and later down, that's where we would normally see the fallout.
And how comfortable after the weekend? What have you heard about businesses operating their eateries, their clubs, etc., and people sort of getting back to life as usual in the new normal?
I'm sorry, I totally missed the first part. You're talking about the new normal in clubs and eatery. You're dropping in and out. So can you repeat again, just the first part?
Just how are you feeling about it? What have been your reports after the weekend, this first weekend?
Oh, I didn't receive any reports. I did a bit of investigations myself. So I've seen people going back to almost what we were before. And so we have to heighten our awareness again and continue. I'm satisfied that the compliance will work in terms of dealing with those who continue to breach the protocols. We must recall that while our local economy is open and our borders are open, wearing of masks and social distancing is the law. And so, of course, businesses can be penalized, and we are prepared to make one or two examples of them. In terms of what we would have seen with clubs, that was flagged by so many different persons to us. So we welcome, of course, the people assisting in the policing and enforcement. And I do know that the police were engaged, and they have been doing what they can as well to police around the islands.
Okay, and as far as what happened with the vetting of the two guests who came in, we know that they attempted to present false documents.
That's incorrect. Can I say this to you? That is absolutely incorrect. There was no false documentation that was being presented. It is still under investigation, but there was absolutely no false document being presented.
What happened?
There is an investigation ongoing. It was picked up in health screening, so inadequate health document, but it was not a falsification of any documents. So the Ministry of Health, once they would have concluded what happened, we do have an idea. Again, I think we'll be satisfied that we have been able to successfully intervene at our borders, but it was certainly not an occasion where tourists presented false documentation. They will report once that investigation has concluded.
Right. We got a statement from the Ministry of Health that appeared to point to that. But what did happen? Because people are concerned about what the breach fell or where maybe the team fell. What happened to allow whatever went wrong to happen? So where are we with it?
So we certainly need to be able to tell the public the correct story. We've moved with urgency. There are one or two other things that we have to do to make sure that we tell the truth story, and not in terms of getting out ahead of it, that we tell something that is incorrect. But I am satisfied, even from the information that we have, that Turks and Caicos will be proud of what we were able to achieve at the border. But again, health's press release spoke to inadequate health information, not anything that would lead persons to believe that it was false. So it's inadequate. Those are the words that were used by the Ministry of Health.
Yes, Madam Premier.
And there's going to be an update on this?
Yeah.
And once the investigation is concluded, the people of the country have a right to know.
Yes, Madam Premier.
What about the, what's going to be the worst case scenario? How far are you prepared to take things for businesses?
So, Ms. DeAndre, can I give you the opportunity to ask this final question, and then we'll go back around the room and we'll come back if you have any final questions.
Yeah.
No problem.
Could you go ahead?
Yeah, I was asking about any company that would breach protocols when it comes to social distancing, mask wearing. I know that there's a team established by Ministry of Health. What do they do? How do they handle that?
Okay, that would be important for you to ask the Ministry of Health, but you would know from the laws that were passed that there are penalties included, and of course you know the Ministry of Health through the Environmental Health Department has powers already to close establishments.
Okay, Madam Premier, no one is blaming you for this increase in cases, okay?
Oh.
It's happening all over the world.
You're gonna have to speak up. I don't know what's
I'm
happening.
saying, no one is blaming you for the increase
Yes.
in but the harsh reality is that we're approaching 100 cases, a population of about 41,000 people. This is a bit alarming by any
Yes,
standard,
it is.
okay? No one wants to jeopardize the gains that the country has made over
Yes.
the lockdown and everything. But have you considered, given the trajectory that we are on now, have you considered implementing any restrictive measures without having to lock down? Have you considered?
So again, the Ministry of Health will guide us in our cabinet that we will go into in terms of restrictive measures. I want persons to not take it slightly.
Right.
But I always see the positive in it. The positive in it is that we've been able to, through contact tracing, test more people who are asymptomatic and stop the spread by isolating those persons very early, testing them, and of course continue with the contact tracing. This increase shows us that people are not following the protocol. And that is important. You won't be able to blame the government or blame any member of the government or the health team. It's just that at the end of the day, persons have to understand that it is really literally in their hands, these numbers. So I suspect that we will have measures, and I say I suspect, not that I'm in the dark, but again, it will be for health to guide us as decision makers and policy makers, and I'm sure they will look at what is happening, because they will have data that the public wouldn't have in terms of how many little clusters there are and how much evidence there really is of community spread, and whether these are high traffic, these individuals that go to high traffic places. So the epidemiologists and the contact tracers will be able to provide us, as opposed to us being able to say, well, we need to do something. They will tell us what the picture really looks like.
Okay, one last question from
Yes.
me. How do you see all of this economic and medical uncertainty, if at all, affecting your preparation for the next elections, which are due realistically in another couple of months?
By next year. By March
I know you can go as far as
2021.
March, yeah, but how do you see this affecting the ability of the country to move into an election season and all that? While governing,
So we've had two
while
elections.
balancing, while governing and while balancing the two, medical plus the financial uncertainties, yeah?
So while balancing the financial, the COVID-19 pandemic and the hurricane season, yeah, perfect recipe for grave uncertainty. But at the end of the day, there's a constitutional responsibility to call elections 90 days past the day we would have been had an election. We've seen it successfully happen already in the region. Anguilla just went through an election. St. Kitts just went through an election. I mean, among ourselves, we call it COVID-19 elections. So there are priorities that we have to juggle that we already know that we have to. And so does it affect elections and how we perhaps campaign and how we ready the country for it? Yes, it will. But at the end of the day, it's a constitutional responsibility.
My final question, look, some people are saying, and I've heard this, and I want to put it to you directly.
Yes.
The Premier doesn't care. She ain't checking. How have you been hearing that, and how would you respond to that in this time? Because there's a perception that you don't care, that you are checking. I mean,
There are lots of perceptions that I'm a liar, that I don't care, and I will deny all of them. I think at the end of the day, this entire team has shown that it cares in terms of the decisions that we've made, the policy positions we've taken, the amount of monies that we're willing to put out there when there's no money. 25.5 million cash grant says we care. You know, there's an effort ongoing for humanitarian response from the government, says we care. There's food packaging that's going on, food vouchers through the social services. And even that, we still continue to focus on all the areas that people care about. So we still have to spend on crime. We still have to spend on our youth. We still have to spend on national security wider. Because we have to care when everybody else doesn't care about those topics. So do I care? I hope so. My body tells me I do. Their long working hours and their exhaustion tells me that. But when you're in the position of leadership, it's very easy for people to throw those sort of things out. They do know that people are working. But it's political season now, it's silly season, so you're gonna hear a whole lot of things. Be always guided that you can ask me, and yes, I do care. And yes, you do have a caring government that is continuing even in the face of COVID-19, in the face of the hurricane, to see how we can continue to help people, whether through policies to waive or to reduce import duties or to write them off completely. I mean, we've lost almost $3 million in import duties, when we know that is like our third revenue generator. So I think our policies definitely shows that this government cares.
Okay.
So thank you. Good morning.
Mhm.